All right, good day, hi, and welcome. Okay, so I'm down here now. Okay, okay. All right, so it's Saturday. I guess that means tomorrow I gotta go clean the school with Paul. Well, if he needs me, pretty sure he will. But uh, my one job a week so far. Well, technically I got two little jobs a week. Woohoo! Finished chapter 3 last night of 2060 Dystopia. It's come along. That was a the add-ons to that chapter were really good. That I did. Yeah. Uh, yeah. So anyway, I guess we're this week in World Crazy. It was the 17th at the making of this video, and I got lots of stuff to talk about. I'm gonna jump in on the big, I guess, the bigger news. Okay, between Cardi and China. Now, take everything with a grain of salt because you know what they say about the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Making a deal with the Chinese, no offense to the Chinese people, but making a deal with the Chinese government is always a loaded double-edged sword, right? So the thing, though, is if he pulls this off, okay, it's a $1 trillion trade package. like Trump could only dream of getting something like that right now. Like it's that's like that's gonna massively boost our economy. There's no doubt about that. Like no matter how much you hate Cardi, like at that point you got to like that if he pulls it off. And what I mean by pulls it off is I mean right now it's just the agreement is there, right? So China could be just playing politics to to pit us against the United States, etc., etc. But it's like I've always said: the liberals sell us out to the Chinese, and the conservatives sell us out to the Americans, right? Both is bad for Canadian sovereignty because the thing is these bigger, more powerful economies come in and they just kind of run rickshaw over ours. Hence why like our manufacturing kind of stagnates and everything because it's like, okay, well, we're not going to open up something unless it's somebody else coming in doing it for us, right? When we should be making those investments ourselves. It's not like we don't have the whereabouts, the technology, or the resources to 100% build stuff in our own country. But I do understand in the short term, like Carney said last night, you know, like like this is a drastic pivot. Like it's not a patch it now, fix it later. Like this is our economy is taking massive hits from the Americans. You know, this is a drastic pivot. So at that point, like how is Trump's 4D chess negotiations going with Canada? Not so good if we're doing that. Now the bad side is that Chinese have already have way too much stake in Canada as it is. So we'll have to see exactly what the details of this trade is. But the areas are like in agriculture. Obviously, we've been, basically stole the oil trade deal from America, took it off their hands because China's reaction was, okay, well, we're not going to buy American oil, we're going to buy Canadian oil, even if it's a little more expensive, we're going to buy theirs because that was Xi's pivot from the United States, right? So Americans lost jobs to us Canadians. But now it's like the trade that the Americans lost to us, which is about 15% about 15% of our economy, or 15.5%, we're no longer doing trade with the United States out of that, 50% or 70, some say as high as 70% of our economy being hooked to the United States. Well, right now, 15% of that is not. So that's just job losses in the States. It's a little bit of job losses here, but the Americans are probably losing like 10 to 1 in job losses because of this. Because what happens here is we're just diverting our trade. Yes, it's super disruptive. When the lumber dispute sorted out. Our biggest issue with the lumber dispute, which goes back before I was even born, The softwood lumber thing is the dimensions. We're making American dimensions. We're using SAE standard to cut our plywood, to cut our 2x4s, blah blah blah. Where the rest of the world's using metric, right? So we only have a handful of mills that pander, say, to Japan, where they cut in metric sizes, and it'll take millions of dollars for many of these places to tool up to be able to supply both, Canada, the United States, and America. We also have to think of the home standards and regulations. Things are built in feet and inches, right? Uh, Metric is going to be a big monkey wrench in the plan in conversion for carpenters and stuff like that have grown their whole lives up working in the SAE, fractional SAE system, right? Which as a Gen Xer, you learned both, right? Metric system came in 1983 with a lot of protest here in Canada, but like it didn't make sense to go to the metric system on this side, on this side of the pond, right? In Europe, it made sense because everybody was already on the metric system, right? So it just now, which system is better? Well, the metric system is easier. If you can count from 0 to 10, 1 to 10, you pretty much understand the metric system. SAE standard, okay, yeah, most people understand, like, say, 1/8 inch, 16th inch, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, etc., 3/4 inch, right? Well, you get 7/16 or 3/32, like into that kind of stuff. It kind of 5/8, like if you're not used to it, 7/32s, 64ths, you know what I mean? Or sorry, 17/64ths or whatever. Like stuff like that really messes people up. You know what I mean? Whereas, millimeters, centimeters, decameters, meters, kind of, you know, nanometers, whatever. Like it really, it really, it's a lot easier. It's just a lot easier. But when you're not set up for it, you know, there was a great skit on this show called Corner Gas, one of the best Canadian shows that ever existed. Of course, they canceled it. Where the guy's like, "Okay, I'm confused." And they're like, "Okay, Hank, what are you confused about?" He's like, "Okay, how tall are you?" 6'2". Okay, what do you got in your hand? 2 liter. See, there, that there. And Canada was like, it's like, why do we have two systems? You're like, I got to get like 3 liters of gas. Yeah. Uh, okay, I got 3 liters of gas. What kind of mileage your car get? Oh, about 25 miles to the gallon. You know what I mean? It's true. It's true, right? So it caught torn between two systems confuses the shit out of everybody, especially foreigners when they get here. It's like they just don't know what to do. It's like pick one. But getting back to that China package. Now this has been tried. Harper tried it to no avail. The problem Harper was before he left office. He was understanding that the pivot to Asia was a thing, right? Whether we liked it or not. So what he did is he opened up a Chinese central bank in Canada, but we didn't borrow from it or anything like that. We didn't use it, right? It was just so that if the yuan took over the world through the BRICS, we'd be able to trade in both systems in the United States and in the yuan renminbi, with the Chinese, right? So that's what Harper did. But then Justin Trudeau won. Now he tried to cozy up to the Chinese with absolutely disastrous effects because they fucking hated Little Potato Man, as they called him. And like the idealism of Justin Trudeau, the man was sickening. Like he would insult everybody everywhere he go just through his fucking ignorance, right? So it's like, he was horrible. The worst prime minister Canada has ever had, and that can be qualified too. So although Trudeau, did with the Huawei thing, he choked on that, but but he didn't hold that lady's feet to the fire enough. So the Chinese ended up rounding up two Canadian journalists or whatever on bogus charges and holding them in captive for with the threat of the death penalty for like 10 years or something like that. Right. So should we be doing business with China? Probably not. Right. And of course, Justin Trudeau borrowed our money from our debt from the Chinese. The Chinese central bank borrowed billions and billions and billions of dollars from them. Not a good, like, it's bad enough to owe the Americans. It's really horrible to owe the Chinese. But the Chinese are smart. It's like, well, here's how you pay us back. We're going to get this from you. We're going to get this from you. Like they'll fucking rob us blind. You know what I mean? Now, one thing Harper did that was stupid. I normally give Harper a lot of credit. I do, but he really dropped the ball in this one. Is he got rid of about half of our gold reserve. Trudeau got rid of the rest of it. How stupid was that? All these, gold's just a barbaric relic. Yeah, look at it now. You know what I mean? And the thing is that it's not about that the price it's at. It's like nearly $5,000 an ounce right now. It's the idea of the hedge that was, because that was telling you how bad things were getting. That's the barometer of gold. It's not really it's not something. It's something that you have to start over your civilization with. The Chinese know this. The Russians know this. The Chinese, they're telling their citizens, okay, the authoritarian government of China is telling their citizens, you better stock up on gold. The world's about to get really rough. Physical gold, not. Here it's all futures contracts, which should be illegal. There should be no futures contract. The stock market in itself should be done away with, in my opinion. Like they're so corrupt. They're so corrupt. But it would be very disruptive to get rid of in the short term. But long term, I think it would be we'd have to figure out a way to do it. First, balance your budget. Second, make sure everybody's gainfully employed. Then we can go after the stakeholder capitalists and stuff like that. The all these vulture capitalists and all that. Venture capitalists, vulture capitalists, stakeholder capitalists, whatever you want to refer to them. The investor class that don't lift a finger other than speculation and making money off of their investments. That's not a way for a society to function. Sure, it works for a handful of people, but we see how disruptive it is, for the American food supply chain because of four giant agro guys dictating the price to the farmers and what they could sell their stuff for, with the farmers taking massive losses. And it's showing in the food prices. Again, will we see food shortages soon? Probably. I mean, the Americans have the everything crisis the same way we do, but it's just bigger scale. That's all. So anyway, Carney is kind of like the third attempt at trying to improve. Basically, the Chinese-Canadian relations have been stagnant for the past 10 years. I'm actually okay with that. You know what I mean? I don't want to really particularly do more trade with China. I'd rather do trade with other countries. But we can do some trade with China, but we really have to have the checks and balances there. Now, the whole EV thing, they've upped the prices from 12,000 to about 35,000 or so to be able to sell those things in Canada. Which, okay, that'll let our canola float back to the Chinese, and we can, that'll help our farmers out. It won't, depending on what Doug Ford says about it, it won't undercut all our manufacturing in Ontario. And there's so many people that are ready to just throw our own manufacturers out. You have to understand, okay, like this idea of, okay, yeah, the Chinese $12,000 EV market, okay, is propped up. It's the idea is to Amazon did this. Every major Walmart does this. Everybody does this. What they do, these monopolies do, is they come in, they undercut you drastically, so that everybody, oh, look at how cheap this is. Oh wow, I can't believe it's on sale, or it's not even on sale. It's just that cheap. How come they can make it so cheap? They can't. They can't make $12,000 EVs. They can't. But they can. They have enough capital to bankroll it, to take the losses for say 4 or 5 years, even 10 years. Okay, and then when all their competition went out of business because they can't compete, they can jack up the price to whatever they want and make all their money back long term, right? That's kind of how they do it. This is why you have Amazon. This is why you have WalMarts and stuff like that. Uh, very very few things nowadays make profit right away. Uh, okay, you can open up a restaurant and lose money. Most businesses go out of entrepreneurs go out of business the first year. First 5 years, whatever, right? So these big investors, right? What they do is it's vulture capitalism is what it is. Now I know some of my subscribers, saying that Reg, we've never really had a true capitalist system. You're kind of correct to a degree. Yeah, a true you know no middleman whatsoever capitalist system. Yeah, we haven't really tried that, but it's still not the answer. Why? Because this is the problem all the libertarians don't seem to understand is I remember Sticks was saying Sticks might be dying, eh? Sticks Hexenhammers, he might be dying apparently. That's what Ramsey Paul was saying. I hope not. I mean, I don't agree with the guy on everything, but he's a young guy. Like holy shit, he's got some illness of some sort, and usually if you're gonna be, he said he was gonna be probably dead within a month. So that's pretty heavy. The only thing that'd kill you that fast is like stage 4 cancer. You know what I mean? That I can think of. I mean, there could be other things, but who knows, right? But anyway, like he was saying, from his libertarian point of view, just like get rid of all, drop, tariffs everywhere around the world. Just get rid of them all, and let the free market sort it out. Well, here's what happens: is now you have to compete with the third world. So the Western countries cannot compete with the third world. We can't. Uh, and again, like we can't even compete with the temporary foreign workers. Can you imagine trying to compete with like China or Bangladesh or some place like that? Like, good luck. They're getting like $1.50 an hour at best. I mean that's what free market capital. Because again, the capitalist does not want to pay living wages to people. We have to be more competitive. We have to drive wages down. You know what I mean? Whereas a nationalist is like, okay, well, we have to, we're going to have to spend something. We need to make profits. Sure, granted, everybody needs to make profits. But you also need to protect your own industries. You need to protect your worker, even the low value workers, or the unskilled labor or whatever. You need to protect that as well. Like small business, you need to protect fiercely. Small business, in my opinion, are the redundancy of small businesses is where we should be focusing, because all this like imports, exports, yeah, that should be icing on the cake. It shouldn't be the main driver of your economy. The main driver of the Canadian economy is still small businesses, but the corporations want to take that out, right? But for the states, their number one driver of their economy is typically big corporations. And right now, it's all about the data centers. And again, their GDP spike was people, renewing their overpriced healthcare, right? You can say, well, Canadian healthcare is overpriced. Yeah, we're overtaxed, but it's still cheaper than the Americans by about $1,000 each. And we don't pay directly out of pocket, and many of our industries pay for it. So yes, there's no such thing as free, but there's better systems. I think like again, as bad as all the things are about the single payer healthcare system, yes, you can die waiting for treatment in a Canadian hospital, especially if you're in an inner city, right, where the cities are just the hospitals are just overloaded, right. I'm far from hospitals, but the hospital that I'm close to, usually you're in and out of there in a reasonable amount of time. You're probably not going to die in the waiting room. It's just they don't have a lot of doctors on staff. And the reason why we're always short of doctors is because we flood in, 500,000 to 1,000,000 people per year. Gee, why can't we keep up to it? Right? You stop that immigration chain, and yeah. But anyway, yeah. So the trick is going to be to see where Carney can actually take the Chinese Canadian relations. I'm all for doing trade, but at what cost? That's the big fear here. Is did Carney just sell us out to the Chinese big time to the point where You have to understand, it leads us to the same things I've been predicting for years. Uh, if we go, because you have to understand the big fire across the bow that this is to the Americans, signaling that, hey, Canada's moving closer in relations to China, which is kind of the Americans' number one enemy, except for whoever Israel tells them their number one enemy is. Right? Maybe Iran is their number one enemy. Whatever. Doesn't matter. We'll get into that anyway. But economically, yeah, it's definitely China is the biggest competitor, right? If they're in some ways they're the number two economy, some ways they're the number one economy. They're definitely the number one manufacturer of the world. There's everybody has sold out their countrymen by. This happened with NAFTA in the '90s. We just offshored all our manufacturing. And if you think about the manufacturing, had NAFTA not happened, even though NAFTA is done away with under Brian Mulroney, okay, and we were still practicing the protectionism of our manufacturing, um, we probably would have seen the resurgence of so many industries in Canada. Like right now, one of the things about this trade war is Canada is now starting to develop its own space program. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that. The cheerleaders, the anti-liberal cheerleaders, are not going to tell you that because they hate liberals, right? But it has nothing to do with liberals. It's what's going on in our country. We've always had a kind of like skunkworks space program, but we're now starting to build rockets. They're small rockets. New Zealand is doing the same thing. They're building like $1 million rockets for small payload stuff. Canada's kind of following suit. It's like the idea is that okay, in about 10 or 20 years, we're not going to be able to probably use the American rockets or whatever. We can't use the Russian stuff anymore because we're at war with them. Um, Elon Musk is not trustworthy. The Americans are not trustworthy for doing that kind. Like so, if you want to put your satellites in space and be competitive with selling space satellites equipment and stuff like that, and technologies, well, you got to have a method of getting it there, right? So right now for Canada, whenever we need to launch something, we either hitch a ride on the American rockets or the European space agency rockets, right? No longer the Russian stuff. So maybe what we could be seeing too is now okay. Well, maybe we start using the Chinese rockets to get our stuff to space because they got their own space program too, right? It might not be to the level of NASA, but like the European Space Agency, their stuff, their guys are just every bit as technical as anybody else. They just don't have the same budget. So the Americans still probably are the kings of space, whatever, but India launches its own, like India can put its own satellite. Again, I always question the viability of an Indian rocket, but they're doing it. You know what I mean? They're doing it. Did they land on the moon, their probe on the moon? I think that's probably bullshit. But yeah, no, they can launch into low Earth orbit satellites. There's a few countries. North Korea can do it. They can't do like North Korea. I think has like one satellite. It's just this North Korean doom satellite. Just this kind of like, don't fuck with it, man. It's our satellite. But there's lots of Canadian space tech out there, and Carney does seem to be pivoting us into those kind of sciences, which is a good thing. But the problem with the sciences is they're all basically, like they're like I don't want to call it welfare, but it's like the military or like that. They're an expense, right? And the thing about Carney is he's in stimulus mode, right? So is Trump. Don't get me wrong. Trump is in massive stimulus mode. Like when you go to war with somebody, that's a stimulus, because you're buying bombs and building bombs and whatever. It's a bad system, but it's the broken window theory. But the broken window theory is a bad theory. The argument is when your economy's bad, you pay a bunch of little boys with slingshots to go out and break windows, and then suddenly everybody has to buy windows, and that'll boom the economy because you have all this window manufacturing. But the problem is when the economy's bad, people that have to take on other expenses end up going out of business because you increase their expenses, right? So it's yeah, it's these short term things. You get these like communists had the doctor versus the garbage man argument. All that stuff. If you haven't heard it before, you can look it up. And there's like they sound really clever at first, but when you think about them for more than 5 minutes, it's like no, it's not. No, we need viable growth, viable and again, it doesn't have to be lightning growth, but if you think about what Carney has done in the last past year, this man hasn't even been in power a year, and if he again take away Carney, put Pierre Poilievre there, with the exception of a few things, most people would be giving Pierre Poilievre, his base would be giving him praise. The reason why the liberal base isn't giving Carney praise is because he's apparently too right wing for them. Because he's not like Justin Trudeau that just went into the humanities and social justice programs, right? That's all he cared about was transgendered operations and stuff like that. Carney doesn't really care about that stuff. He cares more about his portfolios. Like I say, at the end of the day, there's no difference between Trump and Mark Carney. They're both basically invested in the same stuff, right? It's just think of them like mob bosses fighting. Um, but getting back to Xi and that, like, if you look at how Carney conducts himself with the Chinese and stuff like that, it's very professional. It's very professional. Again, not giving the man reigning endorsement. He knows how to play the game better than Trump by like a factor of like a million. Trump is just his ego is his own enemy. Like it's what's killing the United States. He's blinded by his ego, right? And it's just it's he was supposed to be the good guy, right? Carney's not the good guy, and at this point, again, I know there's a lot of people on the lower rungs of society in Canada that are not doing so well. You're preaching to the choir. Yes, the average Canadian populace is not feeling the benefits of what Carney's doing right now. Give it 4 or 5 years. I know, 4 or 5 years. Can't wait. It's got to be fixed now. Nothing can be fixed short term. But the fastest any country's fixing anything is Canada in a way. It's just we have an everything crisis like everybody else. So is Carney fixing the homeless problem and the fentanyl problems? No. Now, mind you, part of this supposed Chinese trade deal, that's, again, this is like stage one of it, so it's not everything's signed perfectly. But some things have been hatched out quite quickly, such as the EV thing. And we'll see more details on it later on, whether we got screwed or whether it's actually fair or whatever. I think that Carney's probably a better negotiator than what we're giving him credit for, not because he's that like great business guy, but he understands politics and he knows everybody's coming for him, even his own side, right? So he's got to basically straddle the political minefield with no matter what you do, everybody's going to be at you. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, right? Because everybody's so pissed off, because of the past 10 years under Trudeau. So he has to really disassociate himself with Trudeau. And so far, he's done that with purging the radicals, the worst of the radicals out of his cabinet. There's still a lot of radicals there, but he's getting rid of the worst ones, right? He's already done this twice, which he's got a long way to go before he wins my vote. But if he fixes the economy, one easy thing he can do is just get rid of the dumb gun grab. The other thing he has to do is fix immigration. Like these are the two number one issues in Canada. It's like the economy. When people say, "Well, it's the economy, stupid." Yes, you're correct. But what is the issue with the economy? The issue with the economy is the youth cannot get jobs because of immigrants coming in, taking their jobs for less pay. The foreign workers. We have to phase the foreign workers out. He's sort of moving in that direction, but nowhere near fast enough. And I understand he doesn't want to disrupt the economy any more than he has to, and he's using the immigrant debt bomb to float the GDP numbers like every other Western countries. It's just the Americans ran out of that runway where they can't bring in any more immigrants to raise the GDP numbers because there's more people than jobs, right? Now, mind you, in Trump did, so far, if we're to believe the numbers, 600,000 people have been deported, which is nowhere near enough out of the 40 million or 50 million illegals in the country. And we'll talk about the Minneapolis riots and stuff like that going on. I'm not following them too closely because it's just George Floyd 2.0. It's just the radical left doing their thing. But it's the reaction to it that I'm more concerned about. Again, problem, reaction, solution, ideological subversion, demoralization, destabilization, crisis, normalization period. And normalization period, as St. Yuri Bezmenov would always say, I call him St. Yuri Bezmenov, is that a loss of rights. Yes, you're about to see martial law big time across the entire United States with these ICE protests and whatever. But I want to get back to Canada for a little bit more. So this trade deal, okay, $1 trillion over what period of time, I don't know, but worth probably about $1 trillion, is a massive benefit to Canada, no matter what party would have done this. Could Stephen Harper have pulled this off? Well, he was in the works of doing it. It's just the Chinese play hardball, right? They really do. But the world is a very chaotic place economically right now because of the United States, mainly due to Trump's policies, right? The Chinese have to pivot from the States. We have to pivot from the States. Every other country around the world, the United States is at war, economic war, with about 170 some odd countries, or the top 100 countries, or whatever it is. Who knows? It depends on the day, depends on the tweet, right? So everybody's in pivot mode. Now, it's been economically beneficial for us of Carney taking advantage of the trade chaos between Canada and the United States to get better deals elsewhere to pivot our economy. So at first you had to say, well, it was just accidental wins of the fuck Trump economy, where people would say, okay, well, I'm going to buy a Canadian product instead of an American one. So it was an accidental win. Like, for example, in Canadian tourism, the Americans are experiencing the lowest tourism they've ever seen in their recorded history. And we're seeing the highest we've ever seen in our recorded history, just because of the boycotts, right? And it's not just from us; it's from the Chinese are about 2 million in Canada. That's about how many Chinese are in Canada, and they've been here for a long time. Since they came in, helping with the railroad and stuff like that. They overplay the Chinese role in the railroad building. It's just because they were the least skilled, they got the shittiest job. But yes, many Irishmen and Scotsmen and British guys and French guys and native guys died building the railroad, trying to take the fucking nitroglycerin, in the blasting caps into the tunnels, right? Yeah. So they say there was one dead Chinaman for every kilometer of rail laid down in Canada, which is a huge amount of people, dying in these horrific, blowing themselves up accidents. But they were the lowest on the totem, so it wasn't discrimination. It wasn't that they were just picked on because white man bad, whatever. No, the white guys were sitting there 16 hours, 16 hours a day with 8-10 pound sledges, driving in rail spikes. The Chinese couldn't do that. They didn't have the strength to do that. I mean, some of them did, but most of them weren't built for doing that. These guys are you have to think, okay, the Chinese now, the average Chinese man is about the average, the most common person in the world, I think in 2015, was a 28-year-old Chinese man. That was the most common person in the world at that time. I don't know what it is now. Now it's probably a 28-year-old, a 20-year-old Indian man or something like that. Who knows? But you got to think about 200 years ago, a Chinaman from 200 years ago, he was a pretty petite man. You know what I mean? He wasn't built for extreme labor like a giant Scotsman or a British guy. You got to think about and again, a lot of people don't realize this. When I was a kid, all the old guys were over 6 feet tall. Almost all of them. There was few guys, the French guys were always the shortest. We always found the French guys shortest. Now everybody's kind of somewhere in average height. But when I was a kid growing up, every guy was over, they were 5'10", 6 feet, 6'2". That was very common back then in my area. Even in the city of Ottawa, all the old guys that were over 40 years old, almost all of them were When I was a kid, they were almost all over 6 feet. And it's not just because I was a kid. It's just because they would say, "Yeah, I'm 6'1", 6 foot, whatever." All my uncles were over 6 feet on my mom's side, except for one. One uncle was the exact same size as me. The rest of them were all over 6 feet. One of my uncle Hector, he was he was like freaking like Hector, like Adonis, Hector, Hercules. He was a big man. He was a big man. He was 6'2", 6'4", whatever he was. So the population has gotten shorter, but also too, like the average Asian is not that big even by today's standard. They're all like Jet Li size, most of them. You know, you get the odd one that's a little bit taller, but like I worked with one Chinese guy named Sid. I mentioned him before. Nicest guy you'd ever. Big powerhouse. He was like Bolo Young, but 6'2". I'd work with him. He'd have like I never seen such a powerful man. Like he was like scary strong. Nicest guy you'd ever meet. Worked with him many times. Hope he's doing well. He was with the Canadian military. He was a field gunner for the longest time or whatever, and then he got out and he ended up night shift. Everywhere I'd end up night shifted, like every about third job I ended up in the 90s. It's like I'd come around the corner, it's like first day on the job, come around the corner, Sid! Reg! Like we were just, because we were both working at the same, going to the same temporary agencies where you go there and it's like, I went to Handyman, and what was the other one? The Futures program. And then there was another one, and we eventually landed jobs here. And we'd always end up, "Hey, Sid, how's it going?" It's like, "Yeah, I'll see you on the next job." Yeah. We ended up at Rona forever, midnight shift at Rona. But what a powerful man, nice guy. But he was like definitely the exception to the rule. Like the average Chinese guy is like much shorter than that, right? So the point is that these guys didn't have they didn't have the build like the European guys to be able to just sit there and smacking the rail ties in all day. So they weren't able to graduate to those jobs. Nobody will ever tell you that because it's like, oh, they were victims and stuff like that. And again, thank you for putting in the labor. You know what I mean? They were part of it too. So you can't discount the Chinese for not contributing to one of the most important infrastructures in Canada. And again, I'm a Canadian nationalist, and even I'm, like, credit where credit's due, right? And I'm sure, yeah, they were, not treated as well as, by today's standards, but it would be the same thing if you went to China. You know what I mean? Like foreigners don't get treated well in China. You know what I mean? Even like when my cousin went to Japan, for example, he goes, yeah, they don't really like white people there at all. He went and got his black belt there. It took him 2 tries, and he said they beat the shit out of me like you wouldn't believe. But he loved it. He says the only thing he didn't like is that he found it way too hot. Like again, we're Northmen, right? We're Northern Canadian. Like being in Japan, like he says, oh yeah, he says it was so freaking hot. He says they're just dying of the heat and then getting beat up all day in the dojo. But yeah. But he says they were very respectful. Like they didn't like you. Like when they would insult you, he says most Westerners couldn't tell when you're being like how you're being insulted. Like for example, the Chinese, if you have tea with them and they put the spout to you, that's an insult, right? If they put the handle to you, that's a kind of welcoming. They have all these little subtleties that us Westerners don't pick up on. The Japanese, how they bow to you could either be an insult or it can be whatever. Whatever, I digress. But anyway, the point I'm making is that with that said, okay, we have about a 2 million Chinese population here, which most of them are in BC, and something like 27% of BC's population is either Chinese born or Chinese, descendant, right? Which, the trade deals we're making now with China can have unintended consequences for Canada, which is something I've been talking about for since 2010, is that Canada and the United States are probably going to go to war, sure, but so is Canada and China, but that's probably not going to be another 20 to 50 years when the Chinese get enough of a mass here to be, when they get a 50% plus one or maybe a little bit more in BC, they're going to say, oh, well, that's always been a Chinese province, right? And try to annex the territory. Why? Because number one, it's their gateway to the Arctic, right? And that's the other thing. So Carney mentioned some things that kind of alarming, and that's like security pacts with China, like going after the fentanyl and stuff like that. Okay, maybe the Chinese will make good on that, but I highly doubt it because the Chinese are the number one distributors of fentanyl. So Trump going on and on about Canada and fentanyl and stuff like that. Meanwhile, when you look at the actual data, it's like it's bullshit. It's just the pretext he wanted to use for his trade war, right? Most of what Trump is saying has some truth in it, but for the most part, it's like, no, the drugs are coming from Mexico, not Canada. Like they see so little fentanyl coming across our border here. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there wasn't any issues, with the legal border crossings, and I don't know how it's going with Canada, but because it's kind of like a bit of a blackout on, like how many illegals are actually walking across the country. But I know it's down by a lot because less illegals are going into the United States. In fact, in Trump's, he got hired to lock down the border, and it looks like he's been fairly successful. I'm sure there's the odd drug cartel guys squeezing in or whatever, but the massive hordes of people coming across the U.S. border on the south is pretty much stopped. So give Trump credit for that. All the damage he's doing everywhere else, at least he kind of got that right. But that's what he should be focusing on more is, the immigrant population is the bigger problem. Of illegals is a bigger problem, right? It's a bigger problem than the Antifa and all that stuff. The Antifa, you can deal with them if you just actually, hold them to account, But anyway, we're going to get into that in a moment. But the other thing is that the United States is looking at this saying, hey, Canada, we've already got you as a threat to the United States on our official status now, but now you're moving closer to China. So that's an act of aggression, right? Now, China could be trying to sneak their way into the Arctic through partnerships and stuff like that. So if the Chinese make good, I don't trust the Chinese government as far as you can throw them, but if they make good on, say, cracking down on the fentanyl, okay, that's a stat, that'll boost relations. That's the right thing to do. But we got to hold the Chinese to account, and the Chinese they don't take well when you call them out, right? they tend to respond in a hissy fit. It's a much more diplomatic than what Trump will do, but the Chinese are like they have their eye on the prize 500 years in the future, right? Like they don't care about the now. They care about where the people, like they're an empire. They still function as an empire. They'll always function as an empire. They function as a unified people even amongst their dissidents, right? They're Chinese first. This is why the Israelis are really pissed with the Chinese because Jewish power can't subvert the Chinese. The Chinese will always fucking undercut you. They'll always backstab you. They'll always, the Chinese backstab the Russians. Their number one ally. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like they're like that, right? But they do, make a deal with you. A deal's a deal. It's just they try to get a better deal for themselves. And again, I'm fine, whatever. They're doing what's in their own interest. It's only when our guys don't care about our own and they just let China get away with whatever they want to get away with. Now people say, well, Trump was trying to deal with that too with China. That's true, he was. And in some areas he did okay in his first term. Now it's just, I don't know, it's just complete, like everything's out the window, right? But yes, the Americans are not going to take well, especially Trump with his fragile ego. He's going to be very butthurt if he sees Canada land $1 trillion trade deal, which you have to think about in economy of scale, okay? If Trump were to land $1 trillion trade deal with China, okay, everybody would be giving him praise. On the left, on the right, center, whatever, because, that's one fuck of a deal, right? That would help the U.S. economy. Now, the Canadian economy is about roughly 1/10 of the U.S. economy in size, and our population is about 1/10 in size. So when you do $1 trillion boost to your economy, whether it's over 10 years or whatever time frame, that is like a magnitude of 10 in comparison to what the Americans would be getting. right? So you just can't, the only question is, will us Canadians be able to keep up to the Chinese demands of, hey, we want this much shit from you? It's like, okay, you know, I know there's tough negotiations on the steel and the aluminum because, like, China wants to flood us with cheap steel and aluminum, right? But that hurts our industries. So I think what Carney's trying to do is say, okay, well, what he's been doing all along so far, whether you like it or not, is okay. Here's what we're going to try to do. Here's what we can actually get done. Let's just get the stuff done. Like that's why the trade deal talks with the United States is like Carney has the ball in Trump's court. He's like, well, look, we're ready to talk whenever they're serious. His own words. Like you can't. Trump's not serious. Trump has no, more and more people are starting to come around to the idea that Trump's rhetoric against Greenland and Canada is more than just rhetoric. He is actually threatening our countries. And I know there's still a lot of people on the right that don't want to believe this, but I'm like, you're not looking at the forest for the trees. So you got like Trump cheerleaders out there going, oh no, this is really about Greenland. We'll pivot to that for now. So because we'll put the Chinese thing on hold for now because we have to see how this is going to play out, right? So in immediate effects, one last thing to say about the Chinese-Canadian trade deal. In immediate effects, this could help out the canola farmers for I guess next year, and will help out the Chinese with their EV distributing in whatever time it takes. Again, we have to look at like I'm sure there's going to be people just ripping this trade deal apart. Everything's bad. Everything's bad. Everything's bad. But if we're just going to look at it from a GDP number point of view, I see it as a positive. But what are we going to like? What is it going to cost us? Is what we're going to have to debate over, right? And again, if it's loss of Canadian sovereignty, and the Chinese can just come in and undercut our abilities, then obviously I'm against it. I was against NAFTA. I hate the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm sure there's some stuff in it that's good, but most of it has just been how the globalists are just going to rape our country, right? No, Harper had the right idea. We need to build it in Canada. Carney has the right idea. We need to build it in Canada. But what you have to understand, made in Canada means is 10 to 30 years of reconstruction of your economy, right? And Carney has maybe 4 years. And I know the people on the left are not going to like this, but the people on the right are really going to hate what I'm about to say. But Carney's probably going to be our prime minister for the next four years, for the next 16 years, probably. I don't think a right-wing government can ever really get, especially with all these immigrants that can vote, can ever really get in power again. And Pierre Poilievre, he has to separate himself from friggin' Trump. As good as Pierre Poilievre could be, Carney's going to be a tough act to follow if he pulls off all these trade deals. It's going to be like, okay, well, why would we ever go conservative again if we keep getting these actual wins, trade wins? Because they're actual trade wins. These are good deals that are being made. They're deals being made. Are they good deals or are they bad deals? You decide for yourself. I look at the EU minerals and metals deals that we're making. Like these are like $1.4 trillion over XYZ decades, over the next 10, 20 years that we're going to be making for this country. That's going to be a boom in our economy eventually. So yeah, we lost 1,000 jobs in the aluminum sector with the tariff war between Canada and the United States. Okay, that's bad for us guys here in Quebec. But we're going to probably end up with 10,000 new jobs in the over the decade, just trying to keep up to our production, right? And again, we're doing trade all over the place. A lot of our aluminum, for example, the raw, I forget what they call the raw aluminum, but comes from, it's like aluminum ore, if you want to call it like that. Instead of iron ore, it's aluminum ore. They have another, anyway, whatever they call it. I forget what it's called right now. That comes from Brazil. Right? So, because we have a trade deal we have a fair amount of trade deals between Brazil and Canada. And that trade's increasing too. The only downside to that is that our trade has to pass through the United States, meaning through trade or whatever. So a lot of our stuff, like for example, Canada is going to have to start to get serious about building freighters because we may have to go outside U.S. waters to do trade. The trains are the most economical because you just haul so much along on trains and have so many trains, right? But the problem is, if the United States wants to be really a real bitch with our trade, they can say, "Well, no, we're going to tariff your trains passing through because even if the trade deal, like you don't know what destruction Trump is going to do to disrupt the Canadian economy. If he disrupts the trains and trucker flows of materials going back and forth between South America and Canada, he can do that. It is his country and whatever. Then that means we have to divert everything to shipping, which is a whole logistics problem right there. So if people are smart, they're going to get out ahead of this because it's just like the idea is to not have anything go through the United States or have them in their hand in the cookie jar anywhere, right? At this stage of the game because it's too volatile. If he starts to put a surcharge on our trains going through, again, and if Trump, hand grenades the whole USMCA, his deal, it means we have no trade deal whatsoever. So that could, destroy the Canadian economy overnight. If nothing can move in or out of the countries because we don't know what the trade deals are. You know what I mean? Like it could bring trade to a screeching halt. It would be devastating for both economies. But the thing is Trump's eye on the prize is to destroy Canada so he can take us over, right? But anyway, I digress. So we'll see what we get out of this deal with Carney and China. Will it be good for Canada? I think there's going to be some benefits. Will it be good for China? Probably some benefits. But are we going to lose anything out of it? Like, what are the critiques going to be? And it's too soon to tell. But I know GDP numbers wise, we'll probably, again, it's a win. It's not an accidental win. It's an actual deal being made, right? And this is the thing. A year on, Carney has probably made, God, no, I can't keep up to all the deals he's actually making, where Trump is 90 deals in 90 days, just not happening, right? And Carney is making new deals. He has diverted about 15.5% trade that we lost from the United States and made up over 24% of that trade lost. So we're actually increased in trade no matter how you look at it. That's already an ongoing thing. There's still lots of disruptions. But, while you're pivoting on policy like this, eventually it's going to have positive effects. Doesn't matter who's in power. And I know, he's a liberal. I hate him, blah, 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 because of Justin Trudeau for 10 years. We're not feeling the benefits, Reg. You're not going to feel the benefits for about 4 or 5 years. It doesn't matter who's in power for that. It takes a while for policy to sink in. It takes a while for supply chains to move. And what you got to think of, like, everything moving at the speed of smell, right? The only thing that's not moving at the speed of smell is the destruction that Trump is causing. Again, it's felt everywhere around the world. It's like taking economies that are already in a rough condition, and the Canadian economy has been basically in the shitter under Trudeau because of all the crazy stuff he's been doing. Carney, like, if you listen to them, like, I spend more time listening to the actual people than the pundits, because the pundits are just, whether they're on the left, whether on the right, all they do is they're just trying to make the other guy look bad. They don't even care about their own. I want Carney to do well. I want Trump to do well. Because if Carney and Trump did well, I mean, this $1 trillion trade deal could be between Canada and the United States. Think of how much more benefit that would be to the world, right? But Trump is choosing not to. Trump is basically pushed Canada closer to China, right? Which is not something I want as a Canadian. What's it going to cost us, right? But anyway, I digress. So the thing is that while that's going on, yes, okay, the Greenland thing. Let's get on to that. Okay, so Greenland, okay, there's still Americans dismissing everything. Reg, no, Trump's not going to attack Greenland. It's a nothing burger. It's just his negotiation tactic. But it's not. You have to listen to the man. You have to listen to pretty much his entire staff is very convinced that they need to take Greenland. Steve Bannon, we have to take Greenland. It has to be ours. It's the basically American exceptionalism, manifest destiny policy, remanifested. And that means they are going to attempt to take Greenland. You have Canadian military generals, loosely talking about what would we do if, right, to the public. So behind closed doors, they're already in the mix. We now have Germany, France, the UK, Finland, Sweden, Denmark. We're not in there yet, strangely enough, with troops being deployed, small numbers like 10 guys, 30 guys, whatever, as kind of like a show of solidarity to the Danes, right? And it's there because they have assessed the threat that Donald Trump is a threat. Now it's like, no. It's about getting negotiations for military cooperation and getting a submarine base and mineral deals with the Greenland. That's what it's about. It's not about taking over Greenland. Here's the problem with that. It's already a thing. It's been a thing since the 1950s. The mineral deals, the Americans are already doing mineral deals with so is China. It's Greenland. They're an independent nation. They're allowed to do whatever they want, even if Donald Trump doesn't. The rest of the world recognizes Greenland as a independent country, or an independent part of the kingdom, right? It's only Donald Trump that says, well, a boat landed there 500 years ago and they say it's theirs. That's a bad argument. Mr. Columbus, Jacques Cartier, it's a bad fucking argument. Don't give the left that ammunition. It's like, it's like Canada doesn't belong to Canadians, old stock Canadians. That's just, just because a boat landed there. You know what I mean? Like fucking Trump, borders, suddenly. Oh, the Canadian border. Well, they say it's theirs, but it's not. Again, these are, the pretexts for war, right? Hemispherical influence, the Monroe Doctrine. That means anything in our hemisphere is ours. No, it doesn't. When independent countries say no, we don't recognize your Monroe Doctrine. What, you're going to go bomb them? You know what I mean? You can bomb one or two, but the thing is that you have to understand, like, we're already seeing, like, the countries that have just put skin in the game. Macron out there, okay, I hate fucking Macron. He's a faggot. I don't know if Bridget Macron is actually a trans, whatever, like, Candace Owens goes on about. I don't care about the Candace Owens Macron thing. I really don't. Macron's horrible for his people. He's absolutely fucking horrible for his people. He's a globalist. And when Donald Trump makes Macron look like a reasonable guy, fuck Trump. This is one of the worst guys out there. Look, I'm a nationalist Canadian through and through, but I am of Norman descent. I am of Frankish blood. Part of my ancestry, right? And he's fucking up my ancestors' land. You know what I mean? Like my ancestral land. Yes, okay. To me, Canada is my heart. It's blood and soil, sure. But I mean, my cousin is France. Fuck you, Macron. You are a douchebag. I hate you. I hate him up there with Trudeau. But that said, being objective, watching Macron out there making his speech, surrounded by three beautiful Rafale jets, and then watching him walk along the line of his military, the guy can sell statesmen. If you didn't know who he was, and you were just new onto the geopolitical game, you'd say, that's a handsome man walking down, looking at his troops without, looking into the eyes of all of his troops standing there at attention on the runway while you got Rafale jets there. That looks presidential. It looks professional. It projects power. Blah blah blah. You get the idea. It's statesman. The optics, right? Not knowing who the guy is, fuck him. But you know what I mean. Like I don't know who's disappointing me more, Macron fucking over his people or Trump fucking over his people. But at least Macron's not fucking over my country. Like Trump's fucking over everybody, right? There are no good guys. Mob bosses fighting, no good guys. But Macron is the scary figure at the party here, not Starmer. Yes, the UK is slightly more powerful of a country in a sense, but you now have, and I know how the Americans dismiss everybody else's military. Oh well, we cream these guys in 2 weeks, 3 days. What? Oh, we'd shoot down the Canadian military in 5 minutes. They'd never get a plane off the ground or whatever. And I'm like, you clearly don't understand the tech we have. Yes, it's in lower numbers, whatever, but you clearly don't understand the tech we have. You know what I mean? Yes, you can critique the Canadian military on a lot of stuff. You can critique the French military. You can critique the American military on stuff. But when it comes to war, all that bravado goes out the window, and the art of war rules, right? The Russians are probably the second most powerful military and most advanced military on the planet. In some areas, they're leading the charge, like say hypersonic missiles and mobile missile launchers and air defense. They're probably number one, even above the United States or on par. The Chinese are somewhere in the distant number three with technology, but not that distance. At the end of the day, if you were to put J-20s in the sky against Su-57s against F-35s, the better pilot wins. The better strategy wins. The technology's too close. If you try to fly an F-35 over China, it gets shot down. If you try to fly an F-35 over Russia, it gets shot down. If you try to fly an Su-57 over the United States, it gets shot down. If you try to fly it over China, it gets shot down. If Russians try to attack themselves with it, they can shoot it down. Okay? The F-22, the B-2s, the F-35s, the J-20s, all that stuff is just a part of it's cogs in cogs in a gear, cogs in the machine. That's all it is. It's not a standalone item that wins a war. There is no standalone item that wins a war other than strategy. You say, Reg, you don't know anything. What are you talking about? Because our submarines are this, are that, our missile technology. The best NATO has to offer is fighting the Russians, okay, via Ukraine against in the Ukraine, right? And that equipment is, it's, the Russians are still winning. You know what I mean? Why? Because the Russians, their tactics are superior. Their cauldron, they know how to do they know how to encircle other armies. They're fucking good at it. And they're still doing it with T-72s. They're going up against Leopards, Challengers, Abrams, you name it. The best tanks in the world, right? And they're taking them out with like $300 drones. Now, in all fairness, the Ukrainians are doing the same thing to the Russians, right? They're taking out the T-90s. The best tank, I think, and the most modern tank in fighting in the Ukraine is probably the T-90 MS or MS, whatever, right? The T-90s. They're a little newer, right? Next to that is probably the Leopard 2A5s and 2A6s. On the Ukraine side are holding up the best. Everything else is just getting blown to shitballs. But tanks aren't particularly doing very well. Like, you're not seeing like the Battle of the Bulge kind of tank battles in Ukraine because you can't get the tanks out in the field without getting taken out by a fucking drone. You know what I mean? So warfare has changed greatly, right? So you've got the 48th or 49th largest military, the 18th or like Ukraine and Canada for military strength is about the same, right? And the second most powerful military in the world, if you want to call them the number two or the number three, it doesn't matter, China, Russia, and the United States, okay? Has been fighting them for, 3 years now? 3-4 years now? They're winning, but they just can't crush them. They can't crush the Ukrainians. Why? The number one weapon the Ukrainians have is the will to fight, right? Now, that said, the Ukrainians are getting their asses kicked by Oreshnik hypersonic missiles. Eventually, those things are going to have nuclear warheads on them. That's when you know you're getting down to the final hours of, down to the World War III count. But the thing is that getting back to Macron, when Macron sends his troops in a show of solidarity, I won't say a show of force yet because the numbers are too low. The idea is not to escalate, right? Because you know how Trump's going to be, oh, you're going to send 15 guys? I'm going to send 15,000, right? Because that's the way Trump is, right? And his base kind of responds to that kind of bombasticness anyway. They see it as strength, right? It's not strength. It's butt hurt. Like to send, okay, right now there's like a few hundred soldiers in in Greenland right now, a few hundred American soldiers on like 8 different bases. Like I say, all those things that Trump is saying we need they've already got these deals. Okay, yeah, you got to work out the actual details of deals. But if they wanted to build an Arctic submarine base to counter the Russians, I'm sure the Greenlanders would be like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Just provide us with some jobs and whatever. Just sweeten the deal. That's all. Again, all the stuff Trump could have done by sweetening the deal. Like just kill him with kindness. That's what Canada's doing with Greenland. We're already getting trade deals with Greenland over it. You know what I mean? Now, why Canada is not in there yet? I think it's because we're on the other side of the other side of the creek to the Greenlanders, so to speak, right? So it's like, well, we're already there, So it's like we don't really need to send forces to Greenland because we're already there. We're already up in the Arctic, right? But the idea that these countries have all shown solidarity, and if you can take it like this, the Americans, the most advanced country they've ever fought so far is Iran, right? And Iran is very, very, very powerful. In fact, it was funny to watch Lindsey Graham almost practically fucking bawling because he couldn't get his war. Now, mind you, maybe it comes tonight. Usually Trump hits countries on the weekend to not disrupt the markets too much because he cares about the stock market more than the people. But the thing is that the United States and Americans need to understand that France is the scary option here. Like France alone, the United States was to go toe-to-toe with the French are completely militarily independent. Everything of their armed forces, every branch of their armed forces is they build it all themselves in-house. Their whole supply chains, everything like that, right? Now, their military is not as big, but their Rafales can fire nuclear weapons. Their Rafales can fire cruise missiles. Their Rafales can fire anti-shipping missiles. Their Rafales are state-of-the-art as pretty much anything the Americans have, with the exception of the F-35 and stealth. That's it. But internally, it can pretty much do everything the F-35 can do. It is the number one selling exported jet. It outsells the French are building Rafales for people around the world. They're back ordered for like at least the next 5 to 10 years, right? Why? Because it's a great jet. And this idea that, well, yeah, but ours is so good they would never get close to us. Blah, blah, blah. No. And the pilot training is on par with any American pilot. It's really, they put too much emphasis. Now, can you find structural problems? And this is what everybody does with everybody's military when they want to. It's like they go and look at all the things that are not functioning properly. Go and talk to any soldier from any military around the world, and they will tell you how shit doesn't work right. Why? Because it's big and it's complicated, and logistics are a bitch. That's why when you see like movies like Red Dawn and stuff like that, like you realize how fucking impossible that actually is. Yes, you could probably get the airplanes to fly over the city just as they run out of fuel. You know what I mean? And then look, we saw what Red Dawn would look like. Day 2 of the Ukrainian invasion, with Russian tank columns sitting on Ukrainian highways waiting for like the next 4 days for fuel. That's what it looks like. Why? Because you just can't move masses like that. The United States can't even do it. So when you see mass mobilizations, you have to understand it's months and months and months and years in the planning. That's why all wars are a racket. They're planned way in advance. You can't just move thousands of troops overnight without planning where you're going to get the fuel and how you're going to keep it fuel supplied and setting up. Again, you know what I mean? Like this is the stuff that the spies figure out for their nations. So when you see all these guys from all these other nations, the Nordic, I call it the Nordic Alliance, plus Germany, France, and the UK. Again, Starmer is not the powerful guy here. It's Macron. Macron seems to be the guy chomping at the bit to put the Americans in their place. It's like, no, this is Greenland. Okay, I don't give a shit about my countrymen being flooded with fucking Muslims and all the chaos in France, but no, hands off Greenland. So Macron is doing the right thing for the right reasons. It's just he won't do it for his own country. It sound familiar? Yeah, here we go, right? Yeah, let's have mass immigration. Anyway, I digress. But the French wouldn't be putting presence in Greenland unless they thought the threat was credible. The Finns would not be putting a much smaller nation, but a very, very capable nation. A lot of people don't realize how powerful Finland actually is. I'm not overplaying their power, but I'm saying they do like the Nordic countries have really good strategies. Would it be able to hold off the Russians for long periods of time? If it was just Russia against, say, Sweden, the money's on Russia over time. But at what cost? Finland, if the Russians ever made a dive into Finland, you'd see a lot of dead Russians. You'd see the Finnish-Russo War 2.0. You would see that. The Finns would lose over time, but I think the Finns would even be doing slightly better than what the Ukrainians are doing, just because of their defense. They've got a good defense strategy, right? Latvia, I think they would get crushed, even with all the NATO guys there. But again, it would be very, very painful. Like these smaller countries, Latvia, Georgia, Estonia, we know the Russians can take those countries. Finland, it probably ends up in a stalemate somewhere. But if nobody interferes, yes, Russia would take it over time. And then they would, but like again, there'd be 1 million men dead, probably both sides. You know what I mean? It'd be a couple of million people dead. Why? Because Finland has a strategy since World War II, because they've already been invaded by the Russians. They know what it's like. It's just their strategy in World War II actually worked to fend the Russians off, and the Russians gave up. Go Finland, go, right? Sweden is kind of similar. Norway is kind of similar. So the Nordic regions, the Netherlands, Denmark, Kingdom of Denmark, Netherlands, they all have that kind of same mentality of kind of like light over might and just a very defensive posture, right? And they're now taking their guys and saying our fear isn't the Russians as much as it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're not dropping their guard down from the Russians. They're watching what the Russians are doing. The Swedes are very good at monitoring the Russians. The Danes are very good at monitoring the Russians, right? Norway, Sweden, Finland. Finland has tried to play the fence for years with two pacts. One, being in NATO and the Russian alliance. I forget what that one was called, but they were in both at the same time, and they now ditched, and went full NATO, right? Sweden has now joined on to NATO. Obviously, all the nations mentioned are on, in NATO. So what you're seeing is a NATO alliance. Now everybody's like, as soon as the United States pulls out of NATO, that's it. No more NATO. And I used to think that too, but now I'm like, no. It's either going to be Macron heading NATO or Carney heading NATO. Trump is out of the question. They're already like everybody's like, oh, NATO's falling apart. No, NATO's falling apart. No, Trump's rhetoric, has pulled a scenario that the NATO people never saw coming. And again, I'm no fan of NATO per se. I do believe there should be a European military alliance that they were talking about. I think they should go ahead with that, scrap the NATO thing. and just take care of home. You know what I mean, and do it whatever works for them. I am 100% on board with NORAD, with Canada and the United States, but the United States might not be on it with us. They're only staying in it for now. Now, mind you, every American military general that is, in Northern Strategic Command and stuff like that, they're saying, no, we need the Canadians big time. We'll have a huge blind spot. Like, the Canadians are covering most of the Arctic. Trump will never tell you that because he hates us, right? But no, Canada is the one predominantly monitoring the Arctic because we have so much of it. We're the second largest Arctic coastline is Canada. Russia's the first, right? Doesn't mean there isn't improvements to be made on our side of the fence. Absolutely. We need to get back to Cold War status with the Arctic and some, right? And, the ball's moving in that direction, so that's good. But the idea that NATO countries are now landing troops, which would probably equivalent the troops if you add up all these nations, again, the Nordic Alliance, I'm all for this new Nordic Alliance with Canada. Look, if the United States doesn't want to be partnered with us, that's fine. It's too bad. But, at least if we have Canada, Greenland, Kingdom of Denmark, all the Danes, Finland, Norway, Sweden, UK, all these, Arctic Circle, or near Arctic Circle people, countries in alliance. That takes up. Well, I'll show you what we get with the Americans. Okay, I'll show you that. Here's Alaska. Okay, so that's the Alaskan coastline. There's Russia. Okay, there's Russia. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's get this. Okay, students, pay attention. Okay, so here's Alaska, right? So the Americans have to cover this predominantly around the peninsula here, and then they've got to cover all this, which is a lot, right? We got to cover all this. Okay, Greenland covers that. Iceland, they kind of, I'm sure they're more aligned to us. Russia has all of this, right? There's Alaska again. Okay, so I gotta grab my glasses here. Put my glasses. Just so I can see a little bit better. I love this map because it's handy for that, right? I've had this map for a while. So you've got Finland here, right on the border with Russia. So they've got to defend all this. They're not quite in the coast, but you've got Norway all the way here, and you've got Sweden in here. Right, and Sweden basically there's Helsinki, Finland, right there, and you got Stockholm right here, right? So you got Estonia here, and then you got Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, right? And then you've got all the Baltic Sea here. Now the Russians have the Baltic Sea up to here, so it's mainly Finland and the Finnish Navy. In conjunction with Sweden that patrol this area here just to see what the Russians are up to, right? So these guys with here, and remember, none of this is to scale. Like Greenland is really about the size of that. This is about, about this size. Like North America is about that size. Russia is about half the size of what you're looking at the map. It's just this is world map. Versus the actual true scale map. The only thing on this map that is actually true to scale is Africa. And people don't realize just how, like Africa, basically you can fit all of North America in Africa. Just so you know, it's literally that big. We think it's this big, but the scale is not true. So it kind of misleads. I'd like to get an actual proper map. It's just they made this so it was easier to read, and then everybody thinks this is the actual size of it. But I'd actually love to get a proper map so I can show you why accuracy matters. United Kingdom's here, Iceland's here. Svalbard, this is part of Norway, sorry. I said that was Iceland, sorry. Iceland's down here. Svalbard. This island's here. Franz Josef Land is basically part of Russia. Where's the island I'm looking for? What's the island? It is Bear Island. That's Norway. Norway here. Denmark here. Your island. So you get the idea. Like every little island is claimed, and then when we get over to, I don't think it's Wrangel Island where the Russians do the nuclear testing. Anyway. Then you got the peninsulas. You can see it between Alaska and the United States. At one point, this is where they talk about the ice sheet where everybody migrated from. Um, and the Chinese, they're way down here, and their claim is these peninsulas here at one point used to be part of Chinese islands, but after World War II, they got the Japanese had parts of them, whatever. And you can see the peninsula then goes into Russian territory about here. So that's what has to be defended, right? But all those nations have sent, small batches of soldiers, but enough soldiers to counter the soldiers on Greenland at current numbers, right? So Trump's next move that he's been talking about was to send, mass troop buildup in Greenland, which would then really, make things very awkward, because then we'd have to see escalation of force by the coalition forces, or what I call the Nordic Alliance, which is right now it's Sweden, Norway, Finland, Canada, and the Kingdom of Denmark, right? So maybe France jumps in on this, whatever. France can provide a lot, but the thing is France is a nuclear power. So the United States saying, and again, I know how the Americans think about their military, that it's unbeatable, blah, blah, blah. But it's never really fought, like a toe-to-toe, military that's, regardless of the scale size to military. The Danish military is slightly less advanced than the American military, slightly. The Canadian military is slightly less advanced than the American military. It's just there's a lot of stuff we don't have covered, but and I know a lot of people are rich. You don't know what you're talking about. We're so much more advanced. You're not that much more. The difference between, let's say like the F-35 and the CF-18, right? Is it's not as massive as people would think, because if ground radar could detect, and it will detect the F-35 early, the F-18 pilot, CF-18 pilot can, it has a look down, shoot down system. It has all this other stuff. If you get into a swirling dog fight, which if I was in an F-18, one of the things I would try to do is get in as close to the F-35 as possible. Even if the F-35 has a little bit more power, the CF-18 is lighter, and its low speed handling is unmatched, right? The F-35 is not designed to turn. If a Gen 1 MiG-29 gets within 15 kilometers into a turning, or 10 kilometers or less into a turning fight with an F-35, and you have two equally competent pilots in there, my money's going on the MiG-29, right? It's just but they'll never get that close. They said the same thing about the F-4 Phantom. You know what I mean? But that was different. It's not different. It's not really that different. The radars that we're starting to employ now can detect stealth. Almost everybody can detect stealth. The hard part is locking onto it and tracking it. That's the hard part with stealth. You can detect it. It's just hard to track, but it's not impossible to track. And if the F-18s detect the F-35s from behind, well, you're going to lock onto that big blowhole in the back. So that thing is no more stealthier than anything. Like, people are like, oh, well, the engine exhaust is cool. Yeah, okay, so it's 150 degrees cooler than what's coming out of an F-18. Okay, great. The F-18, like 1960s aircraft could detect an F-35 from the rear because of that big blowhole. It's the engines, hot engine gases are detectable, You fire a heat seeker at that, you know, you have, like, again, electronic warfare and stuff is the advantage. This is why the soft Gripen makes more sense than the F-35, because it does everything the F-35 does with electronic warfare and all that. It has extremely long range weaponry. The only difference is it's not stealthy, and it's way cheaper to run. So that buildup is a escalation, and I know there's a lot of Americans that are just dismissing it. No, we're not going to take Greenland. It will never happen. He doesn't want that. He wants these submarine deals and base deals and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, yeah, but you already have those deals pretty much, or you would already get a green light per se. No, it is about stealing the resources. Trump has said it as plain as day. Sometimes when the guy tells you the truth, you should just fucking believe him. He really does have a very Napoleonic kind of phase coming that he's in right now, where he thinks, well, I signed the Monroe Doctrine. That means everything is basically American owned. We will dictate what countries in the Northern Hemisphere, who they can sell to, who they won't be allowed to sell to, and if they don't like it, we'll bomb them. We'll steal their leader. We'll do this. We'll do that. We'll commandeer their resources, right? Which the commandeering of resources, they've tried in Iraq, they've tried in Afghanistan. Sure, Venezuela is not as hostile an environment as Iraq, because you have all these insurgent groups all over the place, like in Iraq and stuff like that. It makes doing business and mining impossible. Like even the vulture capitalists won't go in. It's like, no, we're just going to lose too many people getting killed in daily terrorist attacks, stuff like that. Well, the same thing's going to happen in Venezuela in the jungle. Like, how are you going to? You could put military to defend that all. Like, taking a country is easy. Holding it, ask the Russians what it's like to hold territory. It costs you something, right? Now, our world leaders don't care about how many of our people get killed in the process of holding their spoils of war, but the American people might, And again, Donald Trump pissing off absolutely everybody on the planet, with the exception of like a handful of his base. Like, you got to understand, like, the United States, okay, is about to go extreme full authoritarian just in time for the radical left to take back power again and kill everybody. Like, I mean, you have to understand, like, this whole ice raid thing. I guess we can move on to that now. So yeah, we got to keep an eye on Denmark. Obviously, military commanders around the world see the United States as a true threat. They're not playing it out to be what it is, but like on the low, they're saying, yes, this is a true legitimate threat. The United States has gone rogue, right? They're no longer the shiny beacon on the planet that everybody wants to be. They're now becoming the new aggressor tyrant. Putin's allowed to do it. Xi's allowed to do it. Then the only difference is Xi is not crazy enough to act on it the way Xi takes over is long after his death, right? The same way I forget the name of the president of China before Xi. What was his name? Anyway, it doesn't matter. No, the way Xi's thinking is 500 years down. No, I'm going to move my diaspora to every country until they can outvote everybody, and then we just become a voting bloc and like a balkanized nation or whatever, or annex the place. That's what they've been trying to do to Taiwan for like a century. You know what I mean? It's not working because the Chinese, that like half the people in Taiwan are already Chinese descent, right? They're all Han Chinese pretty much. But when people go to Taiwan, there's more freedom there. So like they're like, no, fuck China. Like I'm Chinese, but fuck China. You know what I mean? But again, it's 50-50 in China, or maybe 60-40 of Taiwanese are probably like hardcore Taiwanese in their nationalism or whatever, and would defend the island, and the other 40% would be like, oh, maybe I will side with the Chinese, and then add in saboteurs, add in that, I mean, Chinese spies are not they're not a, they're a real problem. They mainly steal technology to reverse engineer, but they do get military insights, like how do we beat the Taiwanese defense strategy. The Chinese have already figured out the simple answer is we can't. Like the Taiwanese, They can use 1950s equipment and still beat the Chinese from invading. Why? Because like how many bodies are you going to throw? Like how many ships are you going to lose in the Taiwan Strait when you only have like a few months out of the year that you could actually invade, and you only have the possibility of really 13 actual landing points. Now you could try to air troop all guys in, sure, and you can overwhelm the Taiwan forces in the immediate with like outnumbering them like 100 to 1, right? But if the Taiwanese pin you down in those jungles and you run out of ammo and you've got like 10% of your military force on the ground running out of ammo without the possibility of possible resupply. You know what I mean? Like people don't understand. Like you need to look. It's the same thing when I hear America taking over Canada in 3 days or whatever. Only if we surrendered. But if there's a will to fight, I think the two worst places in the world that you could attack currently would be Taiwan and Canada, because it's like Iwo Jima. Taiwan is Iwo Jima 2.0, right? But with cruise missiles and anti-shipping missiles and artillery and caves and just just it would be a massacre. Like 4,500 amphibious assault vehicles that China has would they'd die on the beaches. They wouldn't, if they could make it to beach. If the vehicles could get to the beaches, the landing craft, like the Chinese only have a handful of landing craft that could actually land on Taiwan to begin with, right? It's not enough. Like you need thousands more. Like you need probably 450,000 vehicles, and you'd probably lose 90% of your forces just artillering out in the ocean. You know what I mean? The anti-tank weapons. You know what I mean? Like the Taiwanese, like they've been planning to defend that island for the last past 60, 70 years. You're not just going to take it out overnight with a couple of airstrikes. Like that's the way the American command thinks, is that, oh, well, we do airstrikes and we win the war. You change nothing. Will the war in Iran kick off? I'm sure Trump is trying to use the element of surprise, so maybe he does it next weekend. It's like, okay, no, everybody was expecting it this weekend. And the warships are not quite arrived yet. You know what I mean? They're not close enough yet for the strike. So I'm thinking more like next weekend. It could be this weekend. It doesn't matter. Poor Lindsey Graham, so upset that I don't know how this guy keeps getting fucking reelected. It must be evangelical Zionists electing him or whatever. Because like this evil cocksucker, like he cannot wait to kill people in the name of Israel. He's just so. I hate this man. Pure evil. He's as bad as George Soros. You better pray that God's not real, because that lake of fire, it's cozy this time of year for people like that. I hate that man. Upset because you can't go to war. We need to kill the Iranians. Iran hasn't attacked anybody in over like 170, 180 years. Oh, but they're the number one supporters of terrorism. They have their allies, fine, whatever, what you call a terrorist, but then you go and arm ISIS and Al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda to overthrow Assad, and then you talk about arming terrorists. You know what I mean? Yeah. And this is, again, openly admitted by the United States and Israel that they just call them Free Syrian Army, that's all. And other, moderate forces. But they're all fucking ISIS. To the point where they actually put an ISIS leader or Al-Qaeda leader in fucking charge of Syria. Which seems to have been a bad idea in hindsight. But, it's what Israel wanted. Well, reap what you sow. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens there. But no, the big one is like I say, and to invade Canada, especially in the wintertime, that'd be a suicide. Like, basically, Canada is basically Iwo Jima 2.0 in boreal forests, with Arctic and Alpine winter. You know what I mean? Like, good luck with that. Good luck with that. You know what I mean? Trying to invade a mechanized column through the Canadian Rock Shield. It doesn't matter how many drones you have. It doesn't matter. Like, you would be fucking slaughtered going through that. Oh, well, we'll just go through the prairies. It's open country. Ukraine, open country. Hello. What's like? Okay, the easiest country in the world to probably invade is the Ukraine, because it's especially the southern parts of it. It's all flat. It's all farmland. Not all of it, but it's predominantly farmland, right? And as soon as you pop a tank out in the fucking open, it gets whacked by a drone. Like we're making that shit too. Like we might not have the same scale as the Americans, but from a defensive posture, oh, I mean, where do you think the Ukrainians are getting a lot of their drones from? They're getting them from us, right? We're making that shit too. So you have 15,000 armor column and a 4 million man army. You better quadruple that. It's just it's a bad idea. It's a bad idea just to steal the resources to say we're the king dog. That's how empires die. It's how it'll be brutal. But yet Trump seems to want that, and most of his military staff seem to be on board with invading Canada and Greenland. They keep making excuses for it. They won't out deny that they're going to do it. And again, when Trump comes out on national TV and says we're going to get Greenland one way or another, um, um, either the hard way or either the easy way or the hard way. Okay, so basically, the United States is going to offer you pennies on the dollar to what Greenland's actually worth, and you take that, or you're going to get some democracy, JDAPs. So, are the Americans around to getting ready to airstrike 50,000 Greenlanders just to kill them? Well, they probably are. They probably have the plan for that. But what they got to do is they got to get the Greenlanders to probably protest around some of the U.S. bases, and then shoot, say, oh, well, these are violent protesters. Look at how unreasonable these Greenlanders are. We got to kill them. They're attacking our bases. So it'll be something like that. They have to find pretext other than we're just going to steal your minerals and stuff like that. And well, Russia and China are all over the Arctic. Yeah, they're in the Arctic, sure. But are they all over Greenland? No, they're not all over Greenland. No, you don't have Russian troops in Greenland. You don't have Chinese troops in Greenland. You have some Chinese businesses there. You probably have some Russian expertise in there with resource development, whatever. You have Canadian in there. So what, is Canada now a threat to the United States because we're doing business with the Greenlanders? You know what I mean? Like it's just who can follow Trump seriously at this point and not see him for the threat he is. He's a threat to the Americans. He's the biggest threat. He's the biggest threat to his own country. Nothing's worse than no enemy's worse than the enemy from within. I don't know if that's a Sun Tzu thing, but probably would be in there, I'd imagine. I really do have to buy the Art of War. I've grazed through it over the years and stuff like that, and but it would be interesting. But again, you just look at a map for 5 minutes and you can kind of figure out what's possible and what's not possible. So yeah, the fact is that you have the Nordic Alliance responding to the Trump threat, particularly after this last, we're going to take it, by hook or by crook from Greenland. Your days are numbered, right? And for anybody saying that, well, that's just rhetoric. He's just saying something so that when he offers a better deal, they'll take the better deal. No. What has been the Trump policy? Make some stupid, outrageous statement, and then people divert their trade to somewhere else that's more reasonable. That's all that's been happening. People are, he was threatening to kill us and steal all our resources, but now he's only threatening us to pay us 1/10 of what we're worth. Oh, okay, yeah, that's a great deal. The great deal maker. I mean, in all fairness, yeah, Trump has made some good deals. Yeah, but most of these deals were already in the works. You know what I mean? For previous presidents or whatever. In general, no, he's been horrible this time around. Like, again, comparing him to Trump 1.0, total different man. Whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, in his first, if you break it down, in his first term, he was the best president the United States has ever had, right? And then he goes to this. Why? Like, what does he think he's going to accomplish? Is he that fucking, can he be that blinded by his own ego? I mean, we know history says people can be. When people are psychopaths, they're psychopaths, right? They can't self-reflect. They always double down when they're wrong. And Trump is not the strong man. He is not that. I've been saying that since day one. He's a narcissist, yes. An egomaniac, yes. He is not a tyrant. He is a bully. Don't confuse the two. A tyrant would have already crushed things without even mentioning. There would be no bombastic tirades on Twitter. It would just be get it done. You do not have and be thankful Trump is not a Stalin or a Saddam or a Vidal. You know what I mean? Just be thankful he's not that. But he is, a very bombastic idiot that can get the United States into a lot of blowback. When the United States attacks, say, Cuba, sure, I'm no fan of the Cuban regime, but you have to understand it's going to have blowback. There's going to be blowback from the Venezuelan thing. Again, and then, of course, not to mention all the crazy stuff going on. I guess the last thing the topic is, okay, so this lady that got killed by the ICE agent, right? And people are still in debate. I disagree with, I agreed with Canadian Prepper a little bit. Then on looking at more of the evidence, because again, not everybody's seeing all the same evidence. But no, the lady did run him over. What the argument of self-defense, I don't know if you can argue that he didn't have the right to draw his, again, a man who's already been, who was suffering internal bleeding. Now, what does that entail? Was that just bruising, bad bruising or actual internal bleeding? And, again, he did get hit by the car. She hit him. She literally tried to run him over. Now, him shooting her, the only argument I think in the courts is going to be, was it necessary force or not? I'm in the gray area on this one because I'm like, these Antifa, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt that these Antifa people try to kill ICE agents. There's ICE agents have been killed by them because all these sanctuary governors and stuff like that, and all the mainstream media on the left telling everybody, encouraging all these mentally ill people to go out and put their bodies on the line for the cause in defense of these migrants. Again, there's a lot of scams with these migrants, right? So it's people who are doing the scams are encouraging this division. Go out and challenge the ICE guys and whatever. Never mind rule of law; it doesn't apply to you because your moral righteousness, right? And that's what the left thinks. That's what the Antifa again. These people are really unhinged. Again, the guy on J.D. Vance's door with the hammer. So it turns out it was another transgender guy. Again, why these people they're mentally ill. They're mentally ill. They're unhinged, and again, the studies have already shown that a lot of these mentally ill people, they pick up these causes rather than deal with their own mental health issues, right? And then when your psychology sect of the society is encouraging trans people and all this stuff and encouraging all this trying to normalize the mental illness, and then we wonder why all these people are out there crazily doing stuff, Now, yes, they have to crack down on the Antifa. They have to arrest these people as terrorists. Now, Donald Trump has already assigned these people as terrorists, but they're going to have to use the Insurrection Act. Now, if he goes that far, you have to understand it's point of no return at that point. But the alternative is burning cities throughout the summer, right? So 2026, I don't think there's any. It's George Floyd 2.0 on steroids. It's not going to be over this lady. It's over the anti-ICE raids, right? So there's no way out of that but through. So yes, they do have to go after these organizations. But if they're just going after the thug on the street, that's one thing. You have to go after these Jewish groups that organize all this stuff. You have to go after the George Soroses, all these Antifa backers. You know what I mean? All these Democrat, people have to go to jail. And until we get brave law enforcement military that's willing to arrest higher ups, including these liberal judges that let all these fucking cretins go. I mean, you got another beautiful young white lady, teenage girl, sitting on a bus and two black thugs start shooting it out and they kill her, right? You have another guy in the UK, for example. Some black guy just goes up and stabs him in the back, or it wasn't not in the UK, in the States. He's out there gardening, old white guy just gardening, and a black guy goes and stabs him because he's white, right? Just murders him. And this guy had already killed people before. And why was he out? I think you have strike one and that should be it. I think strike two should be death penalty. I think we have to get to that. I hate to see us go that authoritarian. And I know it's going to backfire on a lot of people. And I understand the libertarian argument. Well, you bring this in, they're going to use it against you. They're already using it against us. You know what I mean? We're at war. You know what I mean? We're at war with the left is at war with the right, etc., etc. Yes, it's stupid. The globalist loves it. I get that. They want all this authoritarianism, and no, there's never a backing off authoritarianism, whatever. But I'm also saying just try to keep yourself alive by staying out of, like, don't go to protests, right? If you're in a diverse area, keep your head on a swivel, because black people are allowed to kill you. It seems without very little blowback from the legal system. Unfortunately, that seems the way it is. I'm not saying all black people are bad or anything like that, but there's a problem. And obviously, our system just says you're just a racist bigot if you notice the problem, rather than try to deal with the problem. They don't put people in jail. They don't put pedophiles in jail. They give them a slap on the wrist. They let these people out after 24 hours. They let these extremely violent Antifa people after like 24 hours. They get let out of the jails, right? When they should be held until their day of court. Again, as a terrorist. And if they're found, like throwing Molotov cocktails, stuff like that, put them in jail for like 50 years. Make a harsh example of them. So yeah, but the jails are already overcrowded. Well, yeah. Put them in labor camps. We need to start to like really beat the shit out of bad behavior. You know what I mean? And just like make them really fucking pay. You know what I mean? Make it hurt. If you were to have people do forced labor in prison, you would see a lot. You would see a drop in the crime rate. Rather than have these prisons run by like drug dealers and stuff like that, right? I mean, either you fix the problem or you don't fix the problem. The Singapore model is basically, unfortunately, what we're going to have to do. You catch a guy selling fentanyl, he gets the death penalty. Oh, but he grew up and don't care. Don't do it. Oh, but plea bargain. Well, plea bargain for the big guy. You never get the big guy. Get the little guy, kill him. Give him his day in court and then kill him. You know what I mean? You do that, trust me, the little guys won't work for the big guys. You won't have to worry about the big guys. If you can get the big guy, great. But no more plea bargains, no more early parole, just mandatory minimums and death penalty for like the most heinous crimes. If they murder somebody, whether they're mentally ill or not, there's no point in burdening the system anymore. Put them down. They're a rabid dog, put them down. Nobody wants to put the rabid dog down. It's not the dog's fault. I get it, whatever. But you can't let it go around biting people. Anyway, I know, oh, how dare you, racist bigot, racist bigot. It'll pertain to white people too if it makes you feel any better. You know what I mean? When people like, I'm in the strike one, you're out. If you're an immigrant, you get caught drinking and driving. Okay, you do your time in jail, and when you're done, you're out of the country. You can never come back. Can't even visit. We don't care if you have family here. We don't care if you have children here. You're gone. You can either take them with you, or you can leave with somebody you trust. Right? Whatever. Just enough is enough. Enough of this high crime. Enough of these like outrageous protests all the time. Enough of this authoritarianism. We need to stabilize our civilization, and we can't do it when you have idiots like Trump trying to get wars going everywhere and destabilizing the economies everywhere, including the American economy. We need to stabilize, but we need rule of law to do it. And we need brave law enforcement military to actually uphold the rule of law rather than doing all this. Like, again, the U.S. Navy is now just a disgraceful pirate Navy going around stealing freighters everywhere. You know what I mean? And the U.S. military, again, going around stealing dictators from other countries. It doesn't matter if they're dictators or not. Stay the fuck out. And if you don't like the country, don't do business with it. Simple as that. Anyway, yeah. So we'll see how, like I say, we're the 17th of January, and like, has it not been the prediction I made? Like we've already seen hypersonic missiles, minor UFO threats. You can go look that, but again, with the AI, it's hard to tell, right? You've got basically NATO countries ready to defend against the United States and Greenland. You've got the U.S. economy tanking big time. All the growth is it's artificial growth of people, just kind of trying to catch up on their health coverage, insurance from the government closed down because the Americans are spending like $1 trillion every 3 months, in debt. Like, it's just absolutely insane. Gold is almost $5,000 an ounce. You got $100 silver, or thereabouts. Like, it's just astronomical. Like, what kind of world are we living in? We're living in a no rule of law world. And every one of our world leaders around the world, without exception, has betrayed its people. Okay, it's a spectrum. Some are worse than others. But in general, yeah, with the multiculturalism thing, it's failed. Okay, with the globalism thing, it's failed. Okay, the wars on this, the wars on that. It's all a scam. The immigration scams. Everybody's tired of it all, right? But until the law enforcement military actually step up and doing the right thing, instead of going after people for fucking hate speech or banning political parties because you don't want people on the right to like they're doing in Australia, banning basically using hate speech laws to ban political parties that go against the leftist narrative. Again, all that stuff leads you to civil wars. Again, I'm not calling for it, but how does it not happen at this point? Allowing the Antifa and all that to get away with all the violence they've gotten away with over the years. The longer you wait to crack down on it, the worse it gets. It all leads to civil war at the end of the day if we don't wrangle it, right? And the thing is that when we get there, okay, this is mainly what I've been telling people. This is why, get out of the left-right paradigm. There's no good guys. It's all mob bosses fighting, right? Just understand who's the worst of the mob bosses. Right now, it's pretty much, Trump on a lot of things is the worst economically. Macron is like, nationally, like, and, the people in Germany and whatever, with all the open border stuff. And, even the problem here in Canada, yeah, they're worse that way, but Australia with the hate speech stuff, yeah, and the UK with their hate speech stuff and all the problems there. Yes, we have the everything problem everywhere in all the Western world because it's all run by the same stakeholder capitalists, and it's all run by the same banksters. It's all run by again, it's all it's all it all comes from the same mob rules, right? And until people realize that we need rule of law, and there's going to be a heavy cost to that, to right the ship. Like, yes, you are going to have to put some of these Antifa fuckers to death for killing people. You are going to have to kill a lot of black people that keep killing everybody. No more, here's your 55th time in jail. No, it's like, I think after strike two, it's like, okay, 10 years in jail, mandatory minimum, no matter what you did. Like if you just can't keep yourself out of jail, let's not be a burden on the rest of society. Oh, but my human rights and blah. At this point, it's like the rate we're going, no one's going to have human rights anyway. You know what I mean? We might as well, punish the worst of the worst. Straighten up, fly right, or die. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's me just being me. You guys tell me what you think. But yeah, no, things are escalating in the wrong direction. There will be an international incident with Trump doing something stupid. My first hunch is that he's going to just the Greenlanders are going to start telling the Americans that no, you can't go off to your bases. You have to stay on your bases because you're no longer welcome in civil society in Greenland. And then, obviously Trump is going to overreact to this. And what you will see is basically Trump sending like mass amounts of troops, especially on the taxpayers' dime when you can't afford it, just as a pissing contest saying, yeah, well, we're going to send 15,000, 20,000 troops to Greenland. How do you like me now? And all the cheerleaders go, oh, look at that, we're sending. Yeah, but you've got to understand what that's costing you. You know what I mean? Like just to do these Jerry Springer kind of fucking games, it's like, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like, again, Trump is in the wrong. He's clearly in the wrong, right? And the thing is you have to understand, like, at some point you might see a clash between French Rafale jets or, Finnish F-35s or Danish F-35s over the Arctic. Then what do you do? If Raytheon shuts off the Danish F-35s in flight, that's it for the U.S. weapons industry abroad, for sure. Like no one's, okay, well, we can't, but we could also see the Danes pull a fast one and say, okay, well, we'll work with the UK or Israel and get their systems in, even if it's a pain in the ass. Like Canada could do this. Okay, let's get the F-35s, okay, as agreed upon. Okay, we'll get all of them, okay, but we're going to replace all, yes, it would cost us a whole bunch more, but we can go to the UK and say, hey, we want your systems in there so the Americans can't hack it. and it would just go around them that way, and then that way they can't shut our airplanes off in flight. You know what I mean? The Brits were very smart to put their own systems in there. Yeah, the BAE systems instead of the Raytheon systems. Israel did the same. Yeah, yeah. That way, we get what we want. We don't have to rely on the United States. Uh, Again, there's no economic argument right now for Carney to try to appease Trump. You know what I mean? Like it's just the United States is not stable. So yes, we want that trade relationship that we had back, but the Americans don't want it. They hate Canada. Well, the administration hates Canada, and they think we need to pay. They really have a hatred for us. If you just listen to the average, their delegates that they're sending around, it's real vitriol what they say to us, right? Now, I'm not saying there's no vitriol on our side. Like, I mean, you got guys like Charlie Angus. Well, I fucking hated him for years anyway. Yeah, he's very anti-American. But the thing is, what I'm talking about is like the ambassador to Canada sitting there trying to patronize us, how we need to just suck it up and become the 51st state. You know, Again, if the shoe was on the other foot, again, Americans would be outraged if China kept saying, "Well, we're going to make you a new Chinese province. You're going to be our Chinese province." The Americans would be outraged by this. You know what I mean? They'd be outraged, and rightfully so. But yet they can't understand why Canadians are, boycotting and doing all these things. Um, but the people that are beyond like the hyperbolics of it, the Jerry Springer of it, is looking at it for like serious. Okay, is Trump truly a serious threat to the West? He is. Is he is he more of a threat than Putin? Actually, in some ways, yes. Not nuclearly. Putin is the nuclear threat, but the Russians aren't going to expand past Ukraine. They might go after some of the softer countries in between the Ukraine and Russia. They've been trying that for years. That's not new. But even at that, it's the Russians aren't trying to take over the world. The Americans are. Yeah, the Chinese are, right? Now the Chinese are doing it. Like I say, even Stephen Harper was smart enough to point out like the Chinese are better at business than the West is. They go into a place and they just do business. They don't try to push their morality or like that. I'm not giving praise to China. I'm just saying they just know how to play the game better. Where we try to force our morality on people, and it usually ends up, in bad blowback. But I would sum it up like this: Max Kaiser, back in 2010 or 2008, whenever it was, he coined that the United States had a death and debt based economy. You take their democracy, take their petrodollar, or they drop democracy JDAMs on you, right? Can't stress that enough, and it's true. But I've also been saying since 2008 that even longer than that, where the United States blows up bridges, China builds bridges. So China is taking advantage of all this chaos and making all these new trade deals for them, for their empire. So Trump's stupidity is making China stronger. Great. Yeah. Again, and Trump's reasonability is, if I just threaten everybody, they will comply. I'll bully them into complying, right? Because that's the 4D chess move, and it's backfired and backfired and back. Think of all the new trade deals Canada has gotten, and we'll have to add them up, but it's in the dozens in 1 year. You know what I mean? Stephen Harper, in a 10-year span, took us from 5 major trade deals to 45 trade deals, and that is the statesman record of any politician in the world. Pretty much, in that amount of time. Even China hasn't probably secured that many trade deals in that amount of time. I think Stephen Harper holds the record. You can check it out on me. Maybe you find somebody better. But it's just like, when you look at it per capita, it's just like it's insurmountable, right? And if Carney's going to outdo Harper on this, that's a good thing. That's a great thing for Canada. The only thing is what is it really going to cost us? We already seen what globalism cost us. What does globalism 2.0 or supply chain 2.0 look like? We don't know yet, right? But what I do know is diversification is the word of the year for most European and Canadian and Canada and stuff like that. It's like, okay, and again, John Turner and Brian Mulroney had this debate back in the 1980s during their election, and it turns out John Turner, the liberal, was right. Brian Mulroney was wrong about globalism. Even Stephen Harper's had to kind of one of the number one globalists in the world has had to say, well, no, maybe it's that there's a lot of unforeseen consequences of just offshoring all your manufacturing and stuff like that, being hooked to somebody else's economy. And whether we like it or not, Canada, I think, is the it's either the 7th or 17th largest trade partner with China. Now, the thing that's interesting is Australia. Okay, Canada needs to kind of look at the Australian model. Australia and Canada have roughly about the same population size, whatever. Canada, much farther, bigger country, way more resources, whatever. But yet, Australia, is all the problems they have, their GDP is about double ours, right? Because of the way they've set up their supply chains, they have to import absolutely everything, almost nothing they make domestically, right? They have, you know what I mean. But what they do is they've diversified their economy to do trade with so many different people. Australia's had issues with Chinese takeovers, the same way everybody else does, particularly us in Canada as well. But the Australians have had to deal with that problem as well, and they got tensions between China and stuff like that as well. Why? Because the Chinese have no qualms about taking over your country economically. You know what I mean? That is kind of their 500-year goal, is to rule the world, right? They're an empire. They're going to act like it. The only thing is, like, China wants Canada and the United States. They just don't need the people, right? Our own globalists don't want us. You know what I mean? Like, let alone the Chinese, right? So the Chinese, what they're waiting for is, and again, this is why a lot of these left-wing organizations and environmental groups and all that, they're funded by China as an act of economic war against Canada and the United States. The United States funds, climate change stuff against Canadian industries, particularly pipelines and stuff like that. And we saw like that Northern Gateway pipeline or whatever, not that the expansion pipelines through BC. That native group that basically that native coalition in BC that stood in front of it and blocked it. Everybody blamed Carney, but it was them that shot it down. And the reason why they shot it down is they're funded by the Bill Gates Tides Foundation. In other words, the United States doesn't want to buy our stuff. They don't want to do business with us, but they also don't want us diverting our trade because then they won't have leverage, right? And this is what the first big major gamble that Trump lost on was Canada. When we had Justin Trudeau, as bad as he was, with the government completely shut down, okay, and completely vulnerable because nothing can be done with a shut down government, Trump was like, if I threaten an economic trade war with them, they will just fold overnight because the Canadians are a bunch of pussies and whatever, and they'll never stand up to us. And then Trudeau goes, "Fuck you, make me." You know what I mean? Like the one right thing he does in the very 11th hour, right? It's like, okay, well, what's the right thing? And then of course, we can't stand up to the Americans. Oh, if we do that, we'll be crushed. Blah 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 blah. And then people who actually understand better how the economy works, and nobody on the planet can understand there's just too much to understand. There's always a hidden thing you didn't think about. But overall, once you understand the generalization of intermingled, intertwined economies like two tumors, the American tumor stuck to the Canadian tumor, you realize that you can't just shut a switch off and cancel business overnight without destroying your own economy. Trump has now found this out the hard way. You can't just shut off the Canadian auto sector, because you do that, you shut your guys down. You can't just shut off the steel and the aluminum. You shut your guys down. You can't just divert trade overnight. It takes time. You can't just open up factories overnight. It takes time. Even if you steal your, the one of the largest oil reserves in the world from another country, you're still not going to be able to use it. At best, in 4 or 5 years, you might be able to get something out of it. It's not enough to crush the other country that, again, the United States' goal right now is to destroy the Albertan economy, to get Albertans to say, oh, make us the 51st state, because even though the Americans have destroyed our oil industry by, cutting us off with stealing the Venezuelan oil and, commandeering our Canadian refinery down there in Texas, create as much havoc up here. People say, well, it's Carney's fault because he didn't make a deal with Trump, and let's be the 51st state. That's not happening. Yes, you have the U.S.-backed propagandists out there, and some of them are organic from Alberta too. I understand that, but in general, no. Most Albertans don't want to be a part of the United States. They can see the forest for the trees. They understand the enemy is not coming from Ottawa as much as it's coming from Washington. That's a bigger problem. Danielle Smith even understands this, that she has to look. She's already diverted oil to the Chinese, right? Danielle Smith has some problems at home, so to speak, with the Albertan economy and debt and stuff like that. But every province does. But that said, she's stepping in the right direction. It's going to take time. It's not going to fix overnight. And reinvestment is going to cost a lot of debt. That's one thing about stimulus is it's a lot of debt, right? But the thing is long term, when you start setting up your own industries and the stuff we can do now, like Carney says, the stuff we can do now, you know what? Okay, maybe we can't build our icebreakers fast enough, even though they're getting built, and our warships fast enough, and we can't, replace our fighter jets fast enough. I get that. That's big stuff. We can't replace the auto sector overnight and the aluminum sector overnight. I get it. That's big stuff. But you can't spike the tourism. You can't spike the alcohol sales. And we've done that. So those industries are just booming, as a result of the trade war. The Americans are losing factories. We're gaining. Maybe not gaining factories, but we're gaining productivity. So it takes the disruption of supply chain 2.0 is diversification, meaning don't be hooked onto any one economy. So yes, right now we're doing maybe a desperate act to doing trade with the Chinese, but as long as we're not at the point where the Chinese have so much leverage over us that they could do to us what the States have done. Why just divert one problem to the next guy who's going to do the same thing? That's the problem with doing business with China or the United States, is they have too much clout in your economy. And that's not a good thing. If you want autonomy, you have to have an economy that is strong from within. If Carney's smart, start really booming small businesses. Give them the tax breaks they need. And you can't do that until you start balancing the fucking budget. That said, yes, Carney's budget is over budget, whatever, and half our budget is being spent on the debt, which take that one as a good and a bad. If we're making our payments off the debt and paying it down, and again, it's too soon to tell, but I'd rather half our budget go to that now so that the next generation, because each payment, our debt deficit is going to come down, which will strengthen our currency. The Canadian currency, I believe, is still strengthening to the US dollar because of the Trump being such a disaster. We're getting that accidental win, right? And yet our interest rates are still lower than the Americans and stable, right? I think interest rates should go up to restore purchasing power to Canada. But if you can keep interest rates low as long as we don't have to bail out the banks anymore, right? But when you're at almost the banks make profit, but they're making the profit from the bailouts, from the stimulus, not from actual profit, right? So we have to have interest rates that can actually make profit, But, with government borrowing so much fucking money, including Carney, he printed $500 billion to keep the Canadian economy going. That is the stimulus, but it's what he does with the stimulus that's the important part. So he is correct. We have to increase trade, because by increasing trade, we can increase our GDP, and we can't do it through the temporary foreign worker debt bomb, right? Where we're running out of runway, where we flooding people in just for cheap labor. We actually have to have good, sound jobs that are profitable, and not just more stimulus. Like we need less government, not more government. Now, Carney is kind of government neutral so far, where he's brought on about 40,000 people, but he's going to get rid of about 40,000 people. We'll see how that plays out when the numbers come in. But at least if it's not growing, that's a good thing, as long as our economy's growing. Because again, we need to get the taxation down in Canada. The cost of living is outrageous. Yes, the man on the street is not understanding the Carney plan. I get that. I hear it in my comments all the time. I get it. Carney's doing nothing about the homeless encampments, but neither Trump is just diverting them. Oh well, there's no more homeless encampments in downtown Washington. Okay, yeah, but they just rounded people up and pushed them away. That's what they're doing here. They're just moving the encampments around. We need to get rid of the encampments by getting people out of the tents and back into homes. And we can't do that when we have all these immigration scams and real estate scams, because we hooked our economy almost solely onto fucking real estate. The worst idea ever, right? Just to keep the banksters happy. So corrupt. And the reason why housing prices are going up is foreigners are buying our houses as laundering, as a way to launder money. You know what I mean? Here, we'll do this, and here's how I pay you legitimately. You buy this house, I buy this house, okay? And when I want to buy something from you, I'll pay you 10 times the market value. And again, it's how they're laundering money. This is well known by the Canadian forces. I mean, I was listening to a CSIS guy last night talking about, like the threats from the States and stuff like that, and the threats from China. And he says, there's multiple threats all the time everywhere that are at different levels, right? And he says, yes, the American economy, attack on our economy is one of the biggest threats we're facing. The biggest problem we have with China is spies, right? And I think most people can understand this once it's explained to them. But it's like the solution is, how do you outrun the collapse of the United States? Because Donald Trump is not taking a single action really to like, he's going full bore, doubling down on his the worst policies ever. The Doge has been short lived. All that money that was saved with the Doge gone, in bombing Iran, pretty much went in one weekend. All the money made from the tariffs, hardly a drop in the bucket comparison to the, again, $1 trillion, $190 billion, nothing to sneeze at, but it's not going to pay down your deficit when you're spending a, $1 trillion every 3 months and going to war with everybody. You know what I mean? Economically and physically. Again, what did that, everybody going on about the Venezuelan attack. Yeah, what did that cost? What did that cost the taxpayer? When you mention to Americans like single payer healthcare system or a 2-tier system, oh, we can't have a socialized. That would be socialism. That'd be, yeah, but what do you think it cost? How much healthcare could you have gotten for the attack on Maduro? You know what I mean? How much could you have gotten for that fucking shameful attack on Iran that didn't really, again, remember Trump? Oh, it's the end of it. We took out their nuclear program. No, you didn't. Number one. No, you didn't do regime change. No, the Israeli Mossad and CIA are not going to overthrow the Iranians on this round of a color revolution. It doesn't work. It worked in the Ukraine, it worked in Syria, but it didn't work. It's not going to work in Iran. The Iranians are just way too smart for it. Yes, I'm sure they're killing protesters left, right, and center, but they got a 1 in 2 chance that they're going to be killing a Mossad agent. You know what I mean? Where do the Iranians get the AK-47s and flamethrowers suddenly in their protests, right? Gee, I wonder. Especially when you have Mike Pompeo out there saying, yeah, don't worry, Israel, the Mossad is right there beside you. Yes. And we know the Mossad is all over Iran and stuff like that. But the Iranians, they are a very fortified nation. You know what I mean? So when they do get attacked, what is the response going to be? Well, I think a lot of dead Americans and a dead carrier group is what I think is, and a lot of bases. Look, many U.S. generals, the ones that are, even on Trump's side, are like, no, we can't win. We can't save those American soldiers on the bases if Iran decides to take those bases out and puts pulverize them, rocket them into paste. The Americans can't defend against that. We're the Americans. We're the #1 military in the world. We have the Patriot missile. The Patriot missile systems did not work against 22 Iranian rockets. All the rockets made it through. The Americans couldn't shoot down one. Why? Patriotism. The Patriot missile system was not designed to shoot down low-level objects. Basically the missiles are going up and over. You know what I mean? The ballistic rockets, like each one only cost maybe like 1/1000th of what a Patriot missile system cost. PAC-3 missile cost, right? Yeah, you're not going to win that war when the other guy is like spending like 1/10 what you are, like 1/1000th of what you are, and close enough is good enough. I mean, the Iranians have shown they're, again, every time you see all these like these pro-Zionist type, and they show the aftermath of an Iranian strike, saying, "Oh, look, they missed here, one or two rockets go astray, whatever," and they focus in on that. But it's like, okay, yeah, but what about that flattened building? That flattened building, that flat. Like I look at the damage. I'm like, fuck, they hit everything. They missed out of 22 rockets, 2 missed or 4 missed. Those are damn good odds, especially when they're hundreds and hundreds of miles away from where they were fired. I mean, this is like basically V1 World War II V1 rocket, or 50 style Scud launcher rockets. Kind of technology, refined. It's like we want to hit here, it'll land within 100 feet of this or 200 feet of this, and just the only thing that the Iranians rockets lack is really powerful warheads, but they're getting bigger. They have the accuracy. They just need to make the bang a bit bigger. Yeah, wait till they put nukes on those, right? So we'll see what stupidity Trump does. Yes, he's going to do it. It's just, when is he going to do it? Israel controls the United States. This is, clear as day. Yes, the Israelis are scrambling people into the shelters this weekend in anticipation of an Iranian retaliation. Why would they do this? Well, because they know the strike is coming. Maybe just like they tip the hat too much, and the Iranians are just like, okay, the U.S. satellites, okay, these guys are ready to hit us back really hard. They know we're coming. Okay, well, maybe we'll hit them next weekend. You know what I mean? Is Trump going to do it? Yes, because Trump is a Zionist evangelical doomer. I've been telling you this for years. It's not what he says, it's what he does. He does whatever the end times prophecy requires him to do. The Israelis, again, you might not be religious. It doesn't matter if you're religious. You have to understand, people with a lot of power and a lot of money are. And it's not only about that. It's about a lot of things. It's about the Greater Israel Project. It's about the banksters. It's about the weapons industry. It's about end times prophecy. And look, yes, the Muslims are in on it. The Jews are in on it. And the evangelical Christians are predominantly in on it. They will destroy the world because they're insane. You know what I mean? You just have to factor that in. Just because they can form sentences and they're not like one over the cuckoo's nest, batshit crazy in front of the cameras, doesn't mean these people are sane. Incredible. You listen to Mike Pompeo. This guy is a euphoric evangelical. Whenever something gets blown up or destroyed, this guy's jizzing in his pants because it's like, Christ is coming, Christ is coming. These people are crazy. Meanwhile, none of them are real Christians. They do not. They might know the Bible, but they are basically, Israel's the chosen people. Therefore, we have to murder whoever Israel tells us to. They're that. They are not God. They don't believe in the Ten Commandments. These evangelicals are not Christians. They masquerade as Christians, but they are not Christians. They are Zionists, and the Zionists know this. This is why these hate preachers, these Christian hate preachers, are on side with the, the imams, hate preacher imams, and the hate preacher rabbis. That the rabbis well, we got to destroy Edom and the Goyim and Edom and what you call it, whatever. Who are those people? Those are the Europeans. Those are the white Americans. That's who they want. The Israeli, the rabbis were saying who they want to destroy, and they won't hide it. They have no, they see us as dogs and animals, right? And their book is telling them that they have the right to treat us however they want because they're the chosen people, right? They believe this, right? Maybe not every one of them, but the ones that are openly admitted. And there's lots of rabbis out there telling you how they have to destroy Amalek, Edom, white people basically, Europe, Yeah, they have to do that. Yes, the Greater Israel Project requires them wiping out the Persian Empire. Like these are blood libels that go back thousands of years. It doesn't matter if you understand it or not. The Jews have blood libels against everybody. Now the Muslims, well, they have their whack. Like the House of Islam believes in the Day of Reckoning, so we call it Armageddon. The Jews call it the Day of Judgment. They call it the Day of Reckoning. But they all talk the end times. All three of them have a different outlook on the end times prophecy. So the Muslim ones believe, for example, the return of Jesus and Muhammad. What do you call it? What do you call it? Muhammad, and Dajjal and is the Antichrist, and Al Mahdi is, if I'm saying is pronouncing it right, is like their Messiah, right? The Jews believe in the Mashiach. Okay, they don't believe in Jesus. They believe Jesus is burning in hell, in excrement, right? They called his mother a whore. Again, the Jews hate Christians. They hate Christians with a passion. Again, they don't hide this. It's only the evangelicals that are so brainwashed into it that they'll overlook it, right? Why? Because according to the evangelicals, the Jews are the better people. They're really better than us, all of us. Again, you got to listen to these people. They're crazy, right? And then you've got the evangelical Christians that, well, we need to have Armageddon so that the light bringer can come, and then we can get the basically the battle of Armageddon, and then the second coming of Jesus, right? And then we'll all be saved, whatever, whether there's a rapture or whatever. And you say, yeah, but that's crazy. Those are just zealots. Yeah, but these are people in power doing this. And Trump, even though he doesn't go to church and whatever, he is a Zionist evangelical doomer. This is what his policies have been in the Middle East. This is why he does whatever Israel says. This is why he will destroy whoever they tell him to destroy. Trump does not hate the American people. Joe Biden hated the American people. Kamala Harris hated the American people. Hillary Clinton hated the American people. Obama absolutely despised the American people. Donald Trump doesn't hate them, but he doesn't care about them. He only cares about Israel. Israel is his number one thing. The other stuff is just side projects, destroying the economy and bombing countries and whatever. So that's what's going on. Netanyahu is a Zionist purist. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. Those are his own words. He hates the West. He hates everybody. He's got a blood libel against everybody, and so does the entire Israeli regime. They are all insane. They want to destroy the world. But on the other hand, they also want to be the technological masters of the world with the social credit score and give China, and again, this is what the whole pivot to Asia is about. They want China to be the world's number one manufacturer, but everybody has to be subservient to the surveillance grid of Israel. That's why you get all these law enforcement agencies in the States trained up by the Mossad. Again, openly admitted stuff. So this is where we're at, right? So it's a very scary time, especially when people just look at it as it's just Democrats versus Republicans. It's like it's much bigger than that, guys. It's going to get a lot more chaotic. The only way out is through. Don't get caught up in the chaos. You're going to have to sit and wait it out. Why die in the protests when you can be liberated or liberate in the oncoming civil war that's coming, right? That's when the real social justice is going to take place. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be brutal because right now the nice thing is that in all this chaos is almost all the party masks are off. We know who's doing what and why they're doing it because they just openly admit. You know what I mean? I mean, there's still like the gaslighting and the stonewall and the people that believe the mainstream media on everything. But if you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, you realize like there are no good guys anywhere in the world right now at the top. Our law enforcement, our military, they betrayed us time and time again. But this is the historical norm. We saw it in 2020. Law enforcement betrayed everybody in the West. Military betrays everybody in the West. regime change after regime change. The military are cowards. They go into all these illegal wars, and then later on when they get out of the military, they tell you how horrible these wars were, and all that. So that's where I'm going to leave it at. It is what it is. There's more chaos to come. Don't worry, you will be entertained no matter what. It's about to get very, very violent, just in so many different directions, especially once the weather, like we're in January, but once the weather really starts getting warm, yeah, watch out. Anyway, there we go.